Funding for Not a Vampire is provided by viewers like you. Find perks and tiers at patreon.com/notavampire. Thank you. There seems to be a fine line between parody and homage. Oftentimes they can overlap, but it seems to be hard to find that golden zone. If the mark is missed, what is meant to be a loving reference to a work you adore turns into mockery and laughing at this piece of media that you claim to treasure. I think the best way to honor and affectionately call back to something in your own work without directly quoting it is to adapt it into your project. Translate what you love about that special film, show, etc., and just give your own take on what made it memorable. Or I guess you can constantly redo iconic scenes for laughs and call it a tribute. Today, dear viewers, we will discuss a tale of 2 tribute episodes of the beloved film The Breakfast Club. Season 3, Episode 16 of Degrassi The Next Generation, Take On Me, and Season 3, Episode 2 of Victorious, The Breakfast Brunch. And through that, I hopefully will explain why one is the epitome of homage, and the other is just... One of my favorite parts of the Degrassi episode is that the show didn't need to bend the world's logic to recreate the iconic Clique characters because they were already on hand. Everyone maintained their established characters, and it was already previously established why most of the students had to be in detention. We saw Toby try to change Jimmy's grade in the school system and get caught, and Sean stealing and generally being in trouble was just his thing this season. We knew Ellie took her journalism co-op seriously, so it was a little stretch to suggest that she'd find a way into detention to be an undercover reporter. And for Hazel, no, there wasn't an episode about her looking up porn in school, but it's also not something established that Hazel would never do. Why wouldn't she get curious like many of us at that age? It's also not a crazy change to make Raditch feel like he needs to be stricter with the students. He'd been in education for roughly 20 years by then, and the further you get from your youth, the less capable you are of inherently understanding what it was like to be young. Yes, he often showed compassion in moments where he felt it was needed, but we'd also seen him act in an authoritarian manner before in response to Emma's protest against the genetically modified foods in the cafeteria. And who else to act as Carl, the one who still understands kids are kids, than Simpson, who has a new lease on life after cancer? Degrassi didn't have to change their characters or world logic to make a Breakfast Club-esque detention episode, nor to adapt some of its most memorable messages. Using Hazel's awkward introduction to porn as a foot in the door to the observation that at some point you're suddenly expected to have a full grasp and be experienced in the world of sex while also being expected to have never done anything sexual. Or how dumb the social rules of high school are, and yet some of us still follow them. Like how it's just a given that someone as preppy as Hazel wouldn't do anything bad enough to get into detention. Like it has to be something trivial, like her shoes not matching her purse. Or how someone like Hazel might not want it known that she kissed a nerd, even if it was for a dare. Hell, the episode used the expected scenes of Hazel getting teased for her higher-than-thou social standing like Claire got in the movie to reference actual criticisms of Hazel as a person. That she was often just Paige's sidekick. There didn't need to be a contrived chase scene or locker retrieval mission to give reason to have a short going through the school montage. Just showing the kids being antsy kids was enough. Showing the students' natural instinct to explore and push boundaries was justification enough for stealing the school keys and venturing to the roof. But what I think I love best about how this episode adapts The Breakfast Club into the Degrassi narrative is that it uses the film to express its own philosophy on young people and how to handle them. Actually, this episode is a criticism of Vice Principal Vernon from the movie. It disputes the notion that children need to be punished and kept in line. From day one, Degrassi has always approached its stories from the kids' perspectives. Instead of giving what you should do's, it shows the characters responding as an imperfect, still learning person might. And what's more, the show doesn't judge or disparage the mistakes some of the students make. Their tales are told from a place of understanding that sometimes you choose the wrong thing because it feels right at the time given your emotions. Stephanie could have easily been shamed for her attire and how she would treat her friends, but instead we got to watch her grow on her own instead of being mandated by being told that she needed to change by some elusive authority. Hell, when Spike got pregnant, abortion was brought up as an option instead of being dismissed outright as just being wrong like some adults outside the situation would want. Degrassi understands that when you're in the moment, black and white aren't obvious. What's correct isn't as clear as they seem when you're not in the thick of it. And from that perspective, Degrassi shows what Vernon could have accomplished if he'd approached the students from a place of understanding, or at least treating them like people as he'd want to be treated, not as scoundrels needing a good lashing. In Degrassi's eyes, it's more effective to be compassionate than to show kids that they can't trust you. That's why Simpson had the talk with Raditch that technically didn't need to be in the episode. The writers were using Raditch and Simpson as vessels for the debate on how to manage young people. Do we really need to crack down and act authoritarian when kids act out? They're still learning the rules of the world, and they're at an age where they need to question why their rules are worth following to begin with. Is it really going to be more effective to take away their Saturdays than to understand that we all mess up and work with them to understand why what they did was a problem? I mean, Degrassi clearly is on Simpson's side, considering that he's the one whose message wins out and actually convinces Raditch to not only release the kids early, but to respond with empathy to the keys getting stolen. When he stopped giving out attentions like food in a food fight, he finally got an answer to who stole the keys, and Raditch was able to appreciate that Toby spoke up at all. Degrassi uses the references from the film to make the argument that kids respond to how you treat them. If you're an authoritarian, then you're not trustworthy. Hell, they even disagree with the notion that such an intimate afternoon wouldn't have lasting effects on the students as we see them greeting each other in the halls on Monday morning. While The Breakfast Club ends with near certainty that the kids will never interact again due to the nature of school and the unspoken rules we follow, Degrassi suggests that there can be hope. That such an emotional and deep bonding experience wouldn't just go away because cliques are too mighty. That even a jock with prior beef with the criminal could risk punishment for him. This is how the world could be if we show empathy and are open to people unlike ourselves. As a fan of The Breakfast Club, there is so much to adore about the episode Take On Me because it just seems to get the movie, unlike its Victorious counterpart. In The Breakfast Bunch, emotional, iconic, and intense moments of raw human experience are made into jokes. The vice principal is still an ass, but he uses dumb Nickelodeon insults like
"Morning, Wazbags!"
What was Vernon outright disregarding Brian's attempts at being helpful, and a comment about how sometimes no matter how much you try, some people just never treat you like a person becomes the vice principal insulting Robbie because insulting Robbie is inherently funny. Claire getting emotionally called out by Brian for still thinking that she was above everyone else is made into a running gag with Robbie randomly over the top crying and calling Tori conceited. The terrifying scene where Vernon threatens Bender with literal physical harm and is the one time Bender doesn't have a witty remark to defend himself turns into a grown man insisting his teenage student pop his arm pimple for an uncomfortably long time. And one of the most intense long shots in history is referenced as a massive and ultimately pointless joke. Victoria sees these iconic lines and scenes and makes them into jokes with the lowest brow humor you're allowed to show on kids' cable without becoming Family Guy or South Park. It's not finding the inherent humor into what should be a serious moment like laughing at the fact that Brian's flare gun went off in his locker before he could use it. It's more like, remember this part, but without helping us to recall why we remember it to begin with. The episode more name-checks things you know the movie for while watering down the reasons why they stuck with you, like making Tori shout, "Forget you!" There's no teeth to taking out the swear, and I promise you, you'll never hear Tori say that again. On top of making everything you remember about The Breakfast Club into a lazy one-off joke, the episode doesn't even work if you try to view it in the context of Victorious as a whole. Tori becomes a mishmash of just about every character from the film in order to parody it while leaving people like Andre and Beck without anything to do for most of the episode except to play out scenes that Tori's character can't reasonably do on her own. Robbie is freaking out over Tori having tacos even though he was there when she said she was going to obtain some tacos. Why were Beck and Andre being nice to Robbie and straightening his hair? Because something similar happened in the movie? But don't worry, Robbie will be everyone's punching bag again in one episode's time. Never again do we hear from Vice Principal What's-His-Face, nor will anything come from the suggested connection that Kat and Robbie made from their not having tacos before. Hell, in the next episode, Kat is back to not so lovingly hating on Robbie just like all the other characters. Nothing is learned, nothing is gained. The episode could literally not have happened and nothing would have changed. I mean, then again, Victorious is mainly an episodic show, so not a lot's getting carried over for storytelling. It is usually rare when episode plot points stick, but I'd argue that such a format is inappropriate if you're going to do an episode in reference to something like The Breakfast Club. Story beats that'll never come up again, random and crude humor, and uncalled for body shaming may work fine for Victorious because it was built to encompass all of that, but applying these aspects to The Breakfast Club comes off as just missing the mark. As though you don't understand why we still remember it. Why the emphasis on Claire's virginity is still iconic, or how callous Vernon was to the kids while claiming they're the problem still sticks in our head. It's like Victorious looked at those moments and thought they're remembered because they're intense, and decided, why not make them funny? No grasp as to what made those events and the film work. I mean, what's not funny about bullying someone over maybe being a vegan? It's just like in the movie! Not to mention, I have Victorious to thank for confusing me as to what the difference between a vegan and vegetarian were for years.
What's a vegan?
It's a person who doesn't eat meat.
I think the line that most sums up my problem with The Breakfast Bunch is this one.
As teenagers, we are all under too much pressure.
This was not written by someone who understands where the characters or young people like them are coming from. This was written by someone who watches Degrassi and scoffs at how dramatic it is and how seriously the characters are taking high school things. Someone who would respond to a kid in crisis with, "You don't know pressure. You didn't have to walk 10 miles to school every day. Just wait until you get into the real world. You'll know what real problems are when you move out and have to pay rent." This is something your textbook boomer would find funny. This is what a Vernon would laugh at. Degrassi saw The Breakfast Club's appeal to humanity to learn to be kind and its warning about hostility towards those who are different or who society deems unworthy of respect. It chose to take those messages and present an alternative to the world in the film. Victorious looked at The Breakfast Club, saw how serious it took itself, and thought to mock it under the guise of all in good fun. No, my main issue isn't that Victorious tried to laugh at The Breakfast Club. Hell, even The Breakfast Club laughs at itself sometimes.
What can you do?
I can, tape all of your buns together.
The problem I have with The Breakfast Bunch, and why I keep praising Take On Me, is because Victorious just doesn't get The Breakfast Club, while Degrassi does. Victorious seems to view the movie as an overly serious drone in need of Nickelodeon sitcom brand humor, while Degrassi sees the film as integral to film history for a reason. While importing moments of silliness of its own, like the students playing cafeteria hockey or goofily montaging through the halls, the show puts its own take on the classic Saturday detention scenario by using it to tell a message. Victorious has no message to tell other than how funny it is that someone seriously thinks,
As teenagers, we are all under too much pressure.
My camera died partway through filming, and that's not the only filming issue that I've had today. Other than that, and just feeling generally salty because of it, I don't really have any updates to give. But if you want more frequent and more intimate updates, then you should check out my Patreon. Pledge to me at patreon.com/notvampire and you'll get access to my Not Vampire Lately podcast. You could have seen this video 2 days ago. You'll be able to see the scripts to all the videos that I still have. And you can also check out the commentary tracks I sometimes do on my videos. I do basically one commentary track a month. And if you want to keep up with the videos that I release, then you should check out this Discord invite link. In the content stream channel, you can keep up with the things that I make and that I'm involved with, and you can also chat me up in my Not Vampire crypt. And of course, Twitter @NotVampire. Thank you very much for consuming this video, and until next time.